All right, nice one. Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod episode 2 with myself, David Windsor, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. Ollie, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like a hedonistic backdrop to your voice that suggests it was a summer weekend of fun in the British sunshine. Am I
Uh,
wrong?
I maybe had too much fun, I think so I would say. Yeah, we did a day at Ascot for the races on Friday, which was a unique sporting experience for me. I've been to the horses once, and then getting to go to Royal Ascot in the Royal Enclosure and experience all the pomp and circumstance that comes with that was interesting. And then Saturday turned into, as we discussed last week, we got the new house, so the housewarming barbecue. And that turned into a bit of a disaster because I, as the grill master, decided to feed everybody else but didn't take any food for myself while everybody keeps recharging your glass as you cook and socialize. And there lies the problem
That's
of
classic
hosting a
Ollie
bar.
Wilson, by the way. That is classic Ollie Wilson. He will help the common man, friends, family, acquaintances before he dares put a morsel in his mouth to help himself. Ollie, what a fella. What
Well,
a fella.
it's because I'd spent so much time with the socialites and royal variety types of Ascot the day before that I felt I was worried about losing that common touch, if you will, Dave. So that's why I was dishing out food to the needy and whoever darkened our door that day. We did
The
big
little
steaks.
burgers were coming out in force.
Oh, mate, not little. Don't worry about that. We went full Costco, multi big packs. We had tomahawks on the grill as well. It was, yeah, it was a fine
Little E.
time.
coli for dessert, no doubt.
Yeah, and you didn't turn up. I mean, the invite went out to you. You said you were busy. There were things that you had to do. You're a guy hustling about the city. I'm out here being the country bumpkin. You're in and out of every side street in London, particularly around the kind of northern part of the city, just hustling away as the summer does, digging up all the juicy stories for us to talk about on a Monday.
And let's talk about sport then, Ollie.
Okay.
I want to say this first of all. Scotland have been knocked out the Euro, Scotland have been knocked out Euro 2024. Last night they lost against Hungary by a very very late goal to nil. Scotland have never qualified for the knockout stages of an international tournament, so this is nothing new, right? It was their 12th attempt to do so, get out the groups, go into the knockouts, and as I think we're going to talk about, it's probably now easier than ever. Like it's harder to get knocked out almost than it is to qualify. So there's that with Scotland. I just want to say this on Scotland's Euro 2024 campaign. I'm 25% Scottish, by the way, Ollie, so I think it's just giving me a little bit of runway here to hammer them. You know, after some of these matches, there's like analysis and there's discord, and people want to say, oh, you know, the left back of the formations and this and that, and the psychology and the courage and this. And I understand you've got to fill column inches, you've got to fill YouTube channels, you've got to fill TikToks, you've got to fill 45 minutes of ITV coverage. I get it all. But ultimately, you could just say at the end of these games, they're not very good. And that, unfortunately, is like the top and tail of most of it. Scotland needed to beat Hungary. They needed to score a goal, which is like the only thing really you need to do in football. And it took them until like stoppage time to have a shot on target. They were awful. They got battered by Germany in the first game. They were good for 20 minutes against Switzerland, but then Switzerland had had loads of chances in the second game. So Scotland have been knocked out. It's pretty ugly in the end, actually. We can talk about maybe what Steve Clark said about Argentine referees, because there's another country I'd love to defend in the aftermath, because it wasn't particularly pretty what he said. But a lot of my analysis here, Ollie, is just that Scotland are a population of 5 million people. Hungary have double the population, a much richer footballing heritage, and Scotland just aren't very good. They don't have the access to the pool of players to qualify for the knockout stages of a tournament. That's 12 tournaments they haven't done it, and I could see another 12 coming.
I think it hurts most because you look at English footballing heritage, and look, we're dining out on one World Cup as England football fans, right? We don't have that strong a tournament record, really. Like, we're consistently there and thereabouts. You would argue that for a country of our size, we probably overachieve. We've got a big help in that the Premier League generates more money than any other football league on the planet, so it gives us a chance to feed down into coaching staff, raising up young kids to have the best facilities from the word go, and we're very fortunate with that. But I'd still say that England probably overdo whatever they outdo themselves, if we get to a semi-final as a nation and our size, right? And then you've got this neighbour to the north that sees all of that and an overperforming nation and goes, well, we're a plucky small nation. Football was created on our doorstep, if you will. Like, why aren't we like that too? And you maybe get into the big brother, younger brother kind of aspect of the dynamic between England and Scotland. And I think there's always that desire, particularly in sporting occasions, for Scotland to just go that one step further than England. but I wouldn't even say football is their first sport in Scotland. I'd argue rugby's more important to the nation, and maybe more emphasis is put into that. That's why there's much more success, particularly you look at the Six Nations level for Scotland in the last couple of years, than they've had in any sort of footballing competition and credentials to their name. So I don't want to be the guy that agrees with you completely on this, but a lot of time in...
Be that guy, Ollie.
But
That's a safe space, man.
A lot of time in sports analysis, it does come down to just you're not great. Like, you can take the NBA Finals. Oh my God, Boston blew out Dallas. Can't believe it. Yeah, they're probably just a better team. At least on those 5 nights of NBA action, like Boston were just a better team. So they won the finals. That's great. Doesn't mean it's not going to change over time or anything. Now, the trouble for Scotland is that things don't seem to be changing. And this is going to hurt really badly because bookies had them at the start of this tournament as being one of the favourites to still qualify through the group, through that third place spot at least, because there are so many spots available now to go into the round of 16. I mean, it's ludicrous. There are going to be more teams in the knockout stage going through than we leave from the tournament. So it's embarrassing for Scotland, and it is a tough pill to swallow. The only thing that I will say is I am genuinely going to miss Scottish football fans and the support they bring into the football stadiums, because I would rather have 5 more...
Because they're hammered.
No, because they don't have that same kind of vulgarity that I think you get in the same way with the English kind of footballing supporter. I would rather spend 4 hours travelling across Germany on a train with Scottish football supporters than I would with English football supporters. And maybe that's just me looking at it and picking out the negative individuals from English football supporting kind of plans going across the nation of Germany to, ruin every single small bar, cafe, tear up all the seats and all that kind of stuff. But we do have that horrible history in general of football hooliganism that I've seen when I was a young kid out at football tournaments. And Scotland doesn't necessarily have that. So I look at the Scottish fans and I go, I just see that as you're enjoying yourself being pissed rather than you're enjoying yourself and then fighting 50 other people in a square somewhere. So I will miss the kind of the blind hope that Scottish football fans had as well, which probably comes when you're blind drunk.
It is beautiful, though. Also, the fact that apparently between 3 and 4% of the entire Scottish population were in Germany for the tournament, I thought was just a really funny touch. And as you say, it's ridiculously misplaced optimism. I mean, they hadn't done it in the 11 tournaments before, but somehow they were going to do it in this tournament, and they haven't. Just on the qualifying for the knockout stages, I do miss the clean kill. Top 2 go through to the knockout phase. Bottom 2 don't go down to the knockout phase in every group. Yes, I understand why it's happening. More is more. More is more. More is more. But I do think you lack something. I mean, the game last night, for example, there was a chance if Scotland got a draw, an outside chance that they could qualify with 2 points, which should be illegal, by the way, to qualify with 2 points in 3 games. But there was a chance. So then what are Scotland fans thinking? Do we kind of hang on and get 2 points in 3 games and hope to go through? And even when Hungary score, it's like now they've got a chance, but not really. I mean, there's no kind of clean kill narrative. There's no golden goal moment. So I do miss that. I think something's taken away because football's such the currency of a goal is so pure, and I think sometimes it's so obvious what has happened and what hasn't happened, but now it's a little bit more blurred.
Oh, well, it's a perfect way to look at football now, considering the world we live in with VAR, and when a goal goes in, are we sure if a goal's gone in or not? In the same way, if a team is in a qualification spot, are we sure whether they've qualified or not going through into the next round of this competition? And we'd have to wait almost a week for all of these other group games to be played out over the next few nights to learn if anybody is going through or not. And it's a bit farcical. You don't get that iconic moment of pure celebration that you've either done it or you haven't done it. Even if Scotland won, I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be nailed on that they would have been going through even with 3 points last night. So it's just like, and then you think of the fans, right? Imagine being a football fan who you've spent X amount of money and you said, look, we are following Scotland to the end of this tournament, wherever it ends, whether it's a group stage, whether it's a knockout stage or whatever. And then you're sat in Germany for another week being like, I don't know if I should be here or not, but that is, that's 6 nights in a hotel. That's not going to be cheap. That's rearranging your flights. That's not going to be cheap. That's all the drink and going out for food and everything like that comes with it. That's not going to be cheap. So suddenly as a football fan, you're stuck in this limbo moment on a different country in the middle of Europe going, this could all be 6 days of completely wasted time for Scotland to then be out by the end of the week, and then I've just got to get a flight home anyway. I mean, yeah, it doesn't do the fans much who are out there much use, but neither does being a Scotland fan, it seems, at the moment. Which, like I said,
Just
I feel sorry for him. I really do.
Oh mate, I wanted them to go through. Like,
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. Like, the idea of how many Scotland fans are out there, and as you say, like that Germany have really embraced all the Scottish fans, and it would be great for them to go through as a knockout for the first time, and it would have been awesome. But it's just watching it last night, I was like, this isn't going to happen for the same reason it hasn't happened in the other 11 tournaments. They're just not very good. I just one word on Steve Clarke, because look, I think in the aftermath of defeats, it is really tough. I mean, Steve Clarke's entire reign as Scotland manager could have been swayed by one goal or the other, right? If Scotland score late on, they're in the knockout stages, and he's like the most successful Scottish manager of all time, no matter what happens in the knockout phase. So
not
I
really. I
get the
mean, just
margin.
not really though. Like if we're altering tournaments to make it so easy to qualify, like qualifying is the prerequisite. It doesn't make you the most. That's the thing that really annoys me about this whole narrative. Like, can they finally do it? It's like, well, they should. It's now not a case of can they. It's a case of you should have. This is worse than being knocked out of any of those previous tournaments because you should have qualified. And I think that's more damning for Steve Clarke. And I'm sure Steve Clarke knows that deep down, which is why he's a bit kind of. He's always been a bit rough around the edges when I've kind of interacted with him at like West Brom and stuff. But yeah, this isn't the same Scotland being knocked out because we just weren't quite good enough. Oh, we were dealt Norway and Brazil in our group in France '98. Oh, we had to play the World Cup winners in the first day. And no, you should have been through against Hungary and Switzerland. There was an opportunity there for if your stars had aligned, if you played like you played for 25 minutes against Switzerland in 2 full games of football, there's a very good chance you're going through in this group, and you arguably should have been going through in this group. You've got some good young talent in there. You've got some players that have experience at a top level of football, like Robertson, who can lead a team through maybe the bigger moments of a football game. You should have been there. And you're not, and that's why Steve Clarke, I think, is a bit rough around the edges on this.
Yeah, and he obviously there was an Argentine referee last night. I didn't think I'd be defending Argentine referees during this, European Championships, but Facundo Tejo, he basically Steve Clarke at the end, he said he was complaining about wasn't it a penalty? By the way, do you think it was a pen? I don't know if you've seen it, but for me, it's not a pen. Like it would have been the softest pen ever. Anyway, Steve Clarke was sort of furious about it. And he said about the Argentine referee, I haven't spoken to him. Does he even speak English? Why is he even here? And I know people are angry. I do get that. Steve Clarke, like I say, his entire career is kind of defined in many ways by this group stage. But it's not great chat, that, is it?
It's rude. It's rude, and it's
Very rude.
Pretty vile, to be honest. I mean, you're just... At the end of the day, he's not there. He's there to communicate with the players and everything, but he's there to make the on-field decision first and foremost. Like, one thing I think referees maybe should have less of is that chat with a player. We shouldn't have any chat. The referee's made a decision, right? So a player talking to him shouldn't be able to sway him or do anything. I'd rather have officials that can't speak a single word of the language of the two teams, because
Prerequisite.
Then you know there's no influence being had. Like, you've just got somebody yelling at you. Yeah, like Robertson's freaking yelling at a referee, and he's like, no penalty.
Like, hey, man.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's what I'd rather see of from officials. And there's not going to be no bias or anything like that. So yeah, but yeah, it all jokes aside, it's pretty horrible. Yeah, it's pretty horrible.
Yeah, no, it's not great at all. One thing I'd say about surrounding the referees, which still goes on now, Ollie. VAR, whatever you think about VAR, it's in the game now, it's in the game for good. Whatever you think about it, as soon as it came in, it should have been in parallel with a decision globally that this ends all chat to the referee. As in, you cannot surround a referee. VAR is in operation, and for all the positives and negatives of VAR, what it should have done, one huge positive, is it should have been at the bare minimum, the only person that's allowed to complain or talk to the referee is the captain, as they do. And I'm not a big fan. I really hate the whole, well, they do it in rugby, so why not? I hate that, because all these sports are different, and there's different criteria, different histories, etc. But surrounding the referee doesn't add anything to the sport. It's crap. It's a really crap look. And why does it still go on? There's VAR now. Like, there's a million cameras on it. You're not going to change the referee's mind. You're certainly not going to change the official's mind in the VAR room.
The worst thing is after the VAR's made a decision, players complaining. That blows my mind, because now we've had like 2-3 officials looking at it, going over it, checking it. They've come to that agreement that that's the decision. I know you're frustrated and it's a natural reaction, but yeah, players then arguing with a referee. I think it's so ugly, but it's one of those things as well, which it's like a broader topic that we always get with these major tournaments, right? So FIFA had at the World Cup had the extended additional time of 7 minutes in each half kind of thing, and people didn't like it, but also people kind of understood it, and that lasted in club football for a few weeks, and then it's just kind of been stamped out. We had a directive probably about 8-9 years ago, which was if a player argues back to a referee in a manner, they get a yellow card, no questions asked. And it happened for the first few weeks in the Premier League. No one got sent off, but there were a lot of yellow cards being shown around, and everybody kind of went, all right, let's just revert back to type because it's getting silly. Because footballers can't keep their emotions in check, it seems, on a football field, and they can't not have that argument. And time again, we keep getting these sorts of directives at a major tournament that will come in and we'll go, oh, okay, yeah, let's see how it works in the club game then. And then it'll be implemented in the club game for 3 minutes, and then just referees back down. The refereeing body backs down to the peer pressure of the players and the clubs, almost saying, oh, it's ludicrous that I get sent off for talking to an official. Well, it's not. If that is what we're saying now is the rule, that if you argue back to an official, you get booked. And if you get 2 of those, you're gone. We don't need to have different cards and orange cards and blue cards coming out. No, if you're stupid enough to keep doing the same thing, you end up walking. And that's what it should be. And that's how it should have been if referees had the gall to kind of stamp their authority down on that position and maintain that. Because 100% every Premier League game would be finishing with 8 men for about about half a season. But it would have eventually stamped out what is a really ugly part of the game.
Yeah. Less than half a season. I think it'd be over in a month. You know, if you actually filled that out, then I think it would happen. Ollie, I know you're on a time crunch. I've got scribbled down in the WhatsApp group, Ollie Wilson thinks cricket's going to be the biggest sport in America by 2050 or something similar. Am I on the right lines, Ollie?
No, I was just wondering what you thought of, obviously, the T20 World Cup when it's played in places like in England with, you know, real historic cricket vibe. It generates a lot of audience. And and because the Euros as well, it doesn't really help. But I've really heard nothing apart from when America, I think, beat Pakistan that we touched on last week. Like that kind of hit as, oh my God, like the Americans have won. And I almost think every major tournament being hosted by a nation that doesn't really have a cricketing history, a sporting history with that sport, needs to have one of those results to try and galvanise a bit of attention. So there's that tiny bit of my brain goes, did they win? Or was it like, oh, we need to generate some hype for this thing? But that's just me being an absolute cynic more than anything else. But I just think it's interesting that we've taken what is a really interesting tournament that's there for people to get into cricket. T20 is there for short attention span, slog it all over the place. I can watch it for a couple of hours, perfect. We've taken it to the US. I just don't get the feeling that the Americans still really care about it. Like, there doesn't seem to be like a lasting cricket kind of pathway taking place here. And I could be wrong, but I just don't see it right now.
One thing I'd say about cricket that I do respect about the sport, and I realise I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here because I hate changes to football because, you know, when you grow up with the game in a certain way, you hate it being tinkered with. And I think the purity of like football and the currency of a goal is such a huge part of football's global success. But outside looking in at cricket, one thing I do respect about the sport is they obviously realise that the traditional longer format of the game just was never going to be sustainable for the next 100 years. So they've really tried. I mean, the organisation, the governing bodies and the players in the past, they've really tried to slice and dice that sport and package it for a TikTok bite-sized generation. And I do respect that because a lot of sports in the next 100 years, Ollie, and, you know, hopefully not another sports pod will be there for the majority of the next century to see through all this. But, like, a lot of sports are going to get swallowed. They're going to get absolutely swallowed by, you know, by the fact that kids now have so many different forms of entertainment and stimuli and phones and 7-second attention spans, etc., etc. And cricket has really genuinely tried to kind of keep up with that and engage a different audience. And I've got a lot of time for that. I think it's the only way they could do it. And I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, I mean, T20 wasn't enough for them. They had to create the 100 because they were like, no, that's too many deliveries. We bring it down. Just 100 balls. That's easy. That's simple.
Love it.
We'll get the 50 at some point. And I don't necessarily mind a sudden death 1 over versus 1 over. Let's see what you got. Like, we'll take the 2 best batsmen in the country and we'll just have them going against each other for an over each. But on a serious note, part of me dislikes it. I love test matches. Like, when you get a gripping test match for 5 days, the swings of momentum. It's a bit like the reason why I like American football. Yeah, it's 3 hours, but there will be a small play in American football that will change the whole momentum of a game that you won't realise until you look back in an hour and a half's time and you go, God, if they just got that extra yard on that play, then that would have happened. And cricket's very much the same in that over a 5-day test match. But cricket needs to slow down because everybody else is trying to break as many global markets as they can. And I'm not sure even cricket is necessarily holding the same market that it used to in countries where it is historically strong. And rather than running off to America, I think you need to do more to get people more engaged again in the sport in places like England, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it's obviously huge in all these countries, but at the same time, cricket, I think, could be falling behind somewhat when it comes to other sports that are trying to crack global markets, so to speak. So, yeah.
Which mainstream sport that exists now, Ollie, do you think won't exist in 100 years? Bear in mind, 100 years is a long old time with the tech world that we live in.
I mean,
what sport do you think?
What do you classify as
Snooker?
mainstream? Well, honestly, horse racing could go, because people get more and more kind of agitated about the treatment of the horses. You know, I think there's a limit now on how much they can kind of whip
One
the
day at
horse
the
and stuff
races,
like
and
that.
he's
No, but they do. There were people at Ascot who were saying, "Yeah, I just don't know if I really agree with the racing." And luckily, from what I saw, most people at Ascot don't watch any of the sport. Imagine going to a football game, Dave, and standing behind the stand to drink and pay minimal attention to what's going on in front of the stand, the actual action that is supposedly what everybody's here for. That's what Ascot is. But you also have to do it wearing a top hat and coattails and look like an absolute muppet. I mean, that's all it is. And instead of paying like £6 a pint down at White Hart Lane, you're spending £9 a pint or 160 quid on a bottle of fizz. Because you can't order anything by the glass. It has to be by the bottle. I mean, it's just ludicrous as a concept that people go there and don't watch any of the sport. To me, it's baffling.
Yeah, one thing that's just absolute clockwork with Ascot is, you know, a couple of days in, there'll always be like a viral video of like a brawl, and there's something about like Brits fighting in top hats that's just like, what are we doing?
It's so ugly. It's so ugly. I mean, this is what I'm talking about.
But you had fun, Ollie, didn't you?
Well,
all right, but you had fun.
It was a good laugh. It was a really good laugh. It was a great experience to go and do it. Like, I'll probably never wear a top hat and coattails again. And I got to see the King. I mean, how often do you say, like, I was 50 yards from the King as he came down,
I love it.
down the race course in the royal carriage and into the royal enclosure. And then, yeah, they go up to obviously the royal box, or they just bugger off home and pretend they're up there. But, no, it's a great experience. But yeah, horse racing could be gone. I mean, snooker, darts will be around forever. That is seemingly for sure. I don't know. I mean, it also depends what you classify as a mainstream sport.
Yeah, I agree. Horse race. Well, you know, I like watching boxing. I really do. And I know you're a big boxing fan. And you wonder, I think a lot of these sports will just have to reinvent themselves. And you know, I don't know. It's 100 years is an awful long time, isn't it, Ollie?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm doing the boxing at the Olympics this year. And I still find it weird doing professional bouts compared to amateur bouts when they've got the head protectors on and stuff like that. Because I'm like, oh, you're not really going to see a knockout blow, are you? You're going to see, like, it's really difficult, I think, to knock somebody out when they've got like that mesh padding around their head as well. And that's kind of what
more concussion, please.
No, but I don't want people to get concussed or anything like that. But when you are I don't know if you've been to a boxing fight before, but when you're at a boxing fight, like, there is that weird thing that takes over and you're like, go on, get him. And like, even as a broadcaster, you can kind of get sucked into that and you're like waiting for that big punch, and that's what it's all kind of lined up for. It's just
same with F1, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, kind of. It's more interesting now than it's ever been. Like,
sure, but I mean, just if people want to admit this or not, like, deep down, there's a jeopardy element of like, these cars are going really, really fast, and if something goes wrong, like, that is there. And that does exist. And
that's why,
you know, it's a big...
having the old V10 engines where you could feel a gear shift from 50 meters away vibrating through your chest, and you needed earplugs, the roar of those engines, that brought out something, because you smell the petrol, you see this tiny little rocket just flying around, and it's giving off more power than you could ever possibly think about having in your possession. And then you think there's just a small man driving behind that who's like 0.2 seconds away at the wheel from spinning off and having an absolute tragic accident. And it puts you on edge. It puts you on edge watching it. And safety obviously is paramount. You have to protect athletes and drivers. But there are times that F1 has made mistakes with, we're not going to drive in these watery conditions. It's like, well, we have wet weather tyres, so let's use them and let's test the best drivers on the planet. Not to the point that we're putting their lives on the line, but to at least that we're seeing whether they are the best drivers on the planet and can they handle all these conditions in the ultimate driving vehicle. I don't know. It's Did you catch any of the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend, Dave? I know you're not.
No, I didn't, Ollie. I didn't. I'll rely on you, mate, to kind of break it down for me. And I'm still waiting for Damon Hill to make his comeback and all of this.
I mean, it's great to actually see we've got Max Verstappen in the Red Bull that wins it, obviously, this weekend, as he tends to always do. But you're looking at Mercedes and you're looking at McLaren behind them, and they are inching closer and closer and closer. Like Lando Norris went on pole this weekend, pipped Max Verstappen to the front spot on the grid, which was fantastic for him. It's his first ever pole position of his career in a Grand Prix, as opposed to the silly sprint races that they've introduced. And the fact that the Circuit de Catalunya is going to be scrapped in a few years' time for another street race in Madrid because it's perceived as a boring track. It's like, we don't have boring tracks. We just have potentially boring seasons when one team's winning it. But actually, when you've got guys fighting on a similar playing field right at the top end of the grid, you can put them on any track, and it makes it exciting because the amount of overtaking opportunities they have coming down this big long straight and sweeping into an S-bend up the hill. It was just fantastic. It was really good entertainment once again this weekend.
Forgive my ignorance, Ollie, then. So is there a trend now towards like the street,
Yeah.
like it being done in a city like Madrid?
Yeah, because everybody wants to be the new Monaco. And people are frustrated with Monaco because the cars have been made bigger. So on the small, tight streets of Monaco, passing's almost impossible. So it's become a really boring affair, except for the fact that you're in Monaco, the iconic street circuit. So that's why we have Vegas, we have the streets of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, because they all want to try and be the one that's, we're the best street circuit. But also I think it's more cost effective. You know, you put up a street circuit for 4 days, you take it down again, as opposed to having a full Grand Prix circuit that you then have to find other events to fill to make money off it, or to have like track days so people can come and experience driving in a fast car and all that kind of stuff. There is a long drawn out hassle, if you will, of maintaining a F1 circuit. Whereas, street circuit, you can also run it by the most iconic points of your city, you know. Imagine seeing an F1 car tear around past Banco de España in Madrid. It will look incredible, but it will also just be another generic street circuit, which isn't designed really for racing. Whereas racing circuits, in my opinion, are where you're going to see some of the best action, because they're designed to have areas where overtaking is easier or tougher, and more challenges such as like gravel traps and things like that. And it's become too fashionable. That's the other thing. When something becomes really like fashionable and cool, I'm very kind of like, I'm out on it. I'm a really cynical. I think T20 cricket apparently is rigged, and I'm not into anything that suddenly becomes cool and fashionable, Windsor. So it's going to be a long podcast, I think, for you if we keep going down this route, mate. I'm here to break your happiness, upbeat experience around everything, mate. You're the man of positivity, as we all know, and I'm here to bring it down.